Hey, Melissa. Hey, Bruce. You're on mute, Melissa.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
How
we
are
are
you?
recording.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you, Bruce, for sharing this information. And
You're very
we
welcome.
we appreciate you helping people to make informed decisions.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Holly, are we going to introduce or are we
Yep.
going to just start the lecture?
No, we're going to introduce. I'm going to give it one more second.
Okay. Is anybody on or is it all just
It's just us.
okay?
Someone may join. Melissa's been promoting the heck out of it. And I've tried to share and like and do all that. So
Thank you.
This sits in a library, Melissa, that people can listen to.
Yes, it does.
I'm not sharing any slides per se. I'm just going to be talking.
yes.
Yeah.
But then Holly, are you going to potentially ask questions?
Yes.
Okay,
No.
but it does require some interaction. Otherwise, I might not go a whole hour. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Do
It's
what's
okay.
Yeah, do what's good for you, Bruce.
Oh.
We're
Okay.
happy for whatever you're going to share.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so hi everyone. This is Holly McDonald, one of the contributors of Club 62 Plus, along with Melissa, our founder, our fearless founder, and Bruce Sham, one of my favorites, although I am absolutely biased, who is also a contributor and a client and friend of mine. So this is mainly, we know that there isn't an audience because we're in the very early days of Club 62 Plus. But one of the things that Melissa and I kicked around, knowing that Bruce can talk about anything, is that when you're going to see this recording, you can see it at any time, but know that this type of discussion that Bruce is going to have with us is really proper for any time. And Bruce has been in the industry for, I will say, more than 3 decades. I'll just leave it at that, Bruce, and people can say what they want after that.
4 decades.
Yeah, and but I don't think there's anything you haven't seen. I don't think I jinx you by saying that, Bruce. But the one thing that Bruce really thrives off of is working with his clients and there being a partnership and making sure that Bruce's clients are surrounded by good people. And so one of the most important things that Bruce can do with his clients is understand all aspects of a relationship. And so, Bruce, I'm going to hand it over to you, and Melissa and I will certainly interject when needed. But knowing that this is being recorded, that this is not intended as any legal or tax advice. We are not lawyers, we are not accountants, nor do we ever want to be. They're lovely people, but we do not wish to be. But this is really, Bruce, from your experience and something you do, and I know this because you've done it with my clients, that you do with every client, and part of making sure what is there really you need to be aware of. We're filming this in the last quarter of 2024, so no one knows what will happen next week. Well, they will when they see this recording, but Bruce, some of this advice that you're going to give, it's timeless. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. And then, I will ask plenty of questions because I love to learn from you. So thank you, Bruce.
Okay, well, thank you both for having me. And it's good to be back. I sort of framed the discussion today around some tax planning tips ahead of the election. Okay. Because again, as Holly said, there will be things that we're going to talk about that have already been put into place that we know are going to potentially expire at various dates, which we'll talk about. But we're dealing with 2 candidates, and for people to say, is one candidate going to be better than the other for the U.S. markets? I mean, when we've studied the markets over the period of time, that isn't necessarily the indicator. It's how their tax position will affect their contingency. To give you an example, right? Former President Trump is very corporate friendly. Obviously, the tax cuts, the changes that he's made in regulations It's going to me is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because the Tax and Jobs Act that he put into place would be expiring during his presidency, should he be elected. As we all may recall, in 2026, there are a lot of changes that are going to take place. Now, there is discussion that that may be extended. I would think, that it probably would be extended should he come into office. But that will also have a tremendous effect on our deficit. The same as if Vice President Harris were to be nominated with her proposed tax cuts and incentives with childcare, first homeowner credits. That's also going to create a deficit, right? A further deficit. So, when people say, well, one candidate could be better than the other for the population, they both have different contingencies. And again, depending upon who has control with the electoral votes, often what we see is gridlock, right? Like it just stops, right? It's just sort of put at a halt. And as we've seen, so many things are not able to get passed. But there are things that could be done now, okay, to take advantage of what is in place today. And I think since we can't really speculate on the outcome of this election, we can talk about what are people doing now, okay? Particularly keeping in mind that we know that there is this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, again, that President Trump put into place, that is expiring in 2026, okay? So what does that mean, okay? Right now, a couple can pass over almost $27.2 million without any federal estate tax. I mean, that is just beyond thinkable in my mind. If we go to the 4 decades that Holly referenced, when I started, there was a $250,000 marital deduction, right? You could pass $250,000 to your spouse with no tax. Then there was $500,000. Then it became $1 million. Then it went to $3.5 million. It went to $5.4 million. And then it went to these humongous numbers, right? Over 12 million per person or 23 million per couple. That is now going to come back down, okay, to 12 million for the couple or 6 million per individual, okay? That's big. So individuals who want to take advantage of their gifting opportunities, of some very unique and creative estate planning. I mean, it's hard to get an appointment with an estate attorney right now because they're so busy with people trying to implement these plans and take advantage of this. Because once it's in place, even if the law changes, it's not taken away from us, okay? What is taken away is the opportunity to do more gifting, right? Because if it's locked and we've already given away all that we're allowed, then we can't do any more. But for individuals with means who want to take advantage of the law today, this is a tremendous opportunity, okay? We still will be able to, it seems like every year lately, they've raised the gift tax limit. This year we can give away 18,000. I can give Holly 18, I can give Melissa 18. I can give 18,000 to just about anybody. My wife and I can split gift. She can give 18, I can give 18. Even if we've used our lifetime exemption, we can still give away $18,000. So, I don't think that that's necessarily going to change. But if we've used up our lifetime exemption, we truly had an estate worth over $27 million, okay, for all intents and purposes, that's probably going to come to a halt. Now, if President Trump extends it, then that will make a big difference, right?
Bruce,
right? Yes.
I hate to interject for a second,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure, because of what you do as your primary role as a special needs advisor, would you also recommend that if someone has a child or a family member with special needs, before they hit that pen to the check for gift of up to 18,000, that could hurt a child with special needs, right? If they receive such a gift?
Oh, absolutely, Holly. I mean, this is a big thing that we see in estate planning that we're doing for more affluent people who are giving away money and they think, oh, wow, Bruce has a daughter with special needs. I'm going to give her this amount of money.
Right.
Big mistake. Big mistake. Bruce has a trust, and I'll be happy to give you the tax ID number and the name and date of the trust. That if somebody wants to gift Amanda money, it must go into that third-party special needs trust. And again, usually when these things come to fruition, it's a mistake that somebody made because they were trying to do something nice.
Yeah.
Right. I was just with a very lovely couple, and that's exactly what happened to their son. That single Aunt Mary just thought, she has no children. She's going to leave everything to Joshua. And now Joshua just inherited $1 million. He just lost his Medicaid. He lost
Oh,
his food
Jesus.
stamps. He lost his waiver services. And again, even though $1 million sounds like a lot of money, a lot of these programs are upwards of 100. You even know what nursing costs are, Holly.
Yes.
Intimately. Melissa, our population. These nursing homes are running upwards of 6, 8, 10, 13, 15,000 a month, not a year. Well, $1 million is going to go pretty quickly, right? So we want to make sure that the money stays in a supplemental special needs trust. The other thing that's really important is once I lose my waiver, I now go on the bottom of the list. It doesn't just the minute I run out of money, oh, state representative, Bruce needs his waiver back. No, my daughter goes at the back of the list. And many states have very, very long waiting lists. So, and the only time a slot becomes available is when somebody dies.
Yeah.
You only lose it if somebody dies or if you go over the limit. So yes, please, if you are making gifts to an individual with special needs or someone who is getting government benefits, you're not really doing them a favor. It really needs to be put in that supplemental special needs.
So Bruce, you would then, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so please correct me, but I think the best advice you would say is before you decide about gift giving, that is a conversation you have with both your financial advisor and your accountant, who hopefully know each other, that you've introduced them to each other.
Well, yeah,
Would you say that would be a best practice,
and
or?
often they don't know each other, and sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Look, Holly, a lot of times people want to give away property. They're looking to give away property, and then now I need the sale of my home for myself to go into a nursing home. Right. So, maybe I put my house in a trust thinking that, okay, this way my child will have a place to live. But now, wait a second, I need the sale of that to move into, my new nursing home. So again, I think it's very important that all parties are speaking together. And as you've seen, when we're making those decisions of where we're going, work with a financial advisor to make sure that there are the finances to sustain it. You don't want to make those moves twice, certainly not 3 times, right? Like you want to go into a facility that is going to be able to accommodate you as you age, right? I don't want to be in a place that I love and now I'm starting to suffer a little bit. I'm forgetful. I want to be in a place that can accommodate me for the rest of my life. It's hard enough to move once or twice, let alone when we're already failing. You don't want to be in that situation. And particularly for those of us who are the caregivers, right? Like we are the caregivers of our parents and things like that, as we start to age, as we start to develop our own medical issues, and I'm sort of that sandwich generation with the 91-year-old mother and the 43-year-old daughter, both with special needs. What's going to happen if I get sick? Right. So, I have always stressed that I want to make sure that they are both placed in a safe environment. So that if something happens to me, that could completely derail me if something happened. My mom ended up in the emergency room. It was very frightening. My 91-year-old mother was healthier than my 43-year-old daughter for most of this time. So that was really scary. Any other questions though about the gifting before I continue with some of the opportunities that I think that we have?
So I would say, Bruce, for those that say they've sold a property, which we see a lot where people, around election time, they do funny things, right? They either maybe buy some real estate, maybe they've exited the market because they're not sure who's going to win. And that can happen at any time. People get spooked. They don't, if there's a big rally, if there's a really bad day, or say a stretch of bad days with the market. But when someone wants to gift more than that 18,000, when they want to make sure that that cash is kind of out of their hands, are there any tax advantages to giving more money that you would recommend? And say it's, that person, maybe they have the family or they have someone they quote unquote want to take care of, or a charity. Is there any advice that you would give or that you share with your clients when they want to gift more than the 18,000, if they're fortunate to be enough in that position, without kind of damaging, say they're at a facility or they're in a senior living community and they've got plenty of money. They're one of the anomalies, but it does happen. Is there anything
It does happen,
you
but
can
there's
talk about?
also, Holly, as you've seen, there's, that people often get confused. There's a 3-year look back for estate tax planning and a 5-year look back for Medicaid planning. And if you are in a facility and there is that potential that you could run out of money, often people plan for, oh, independent, 3,000-4,000 a month, no problem, I'm never going to run out of money. But they're not looking at, okay, now all of a sudden I need assisted and it went up to 6,000. Now I need skilled, it's up to 8,000-10,000. I think you really have to be careful, because they could potentially, if we're trying to get somebody Medicaid qualified at that point, government could say, you gave away that money just so that you could get Medicaid qualified, right? There's a 5-year look back. So I think that we really want to be very diligent to make sure that, that there is sufficient assets so that the individual with the means can live out their life. Certainly in their estate plan, it can be left to us when they are gone, right? Whatever's left could be left. Doesn't have to be given away during the lifetime. I mean, that's just one thought there, right? It doesn't have to be given away during the lifetime. For somebody who has the means, though, I think that's the point that I was trying to make. You can accelerate those gifts up to, if you're a couple, over $27 million right now, right? Individual over $13.2 million. There's no gift tax, Holly. There's no gift tax if I want to give more than 18,000. I basically am just filing a gift tax return showing that in this year I used up 3, 4, 5 million of that gift, my lifetime gift exemption. It's only once I've exceeded my $13 million lifetime exemption today, as I'm saying, after next week, it could be back to, well, in 2026, in January of 2026, it's going to be cut in half.
Right.
However, depending upon what happens next week, it could be cut sooner. It could be extended. We do not know, right? That these are things that are going to unfold pretty quickly, I think. I think these are things that are going to unfold pretty quickly. Usually when candidates have their list of tax agenda items, you see a lot of negotiation. There's some in there that are so outlandish that, that they know that they're going to just say, oh yeah, we're not going there. But they are going to try to get things passed that they can. Okay. And I think everybody is in agreement that income taxes are only going up, right? I mean, I don't know that anybody's going to say income taxes are going to go down. What people are concerned about, corporations, business owners, people who are making lots of money, is some of the tax benefits that have been extended to corporations. The corporate tax rates are lower than ever. Individuals in service businesses have been extended really nice tax rates. If that changes, that is going to impact individuals, significantly, right? If Vice President Harris comes in and raises the Social Security threshold, all right, there's a lot of discussion of what's going to happen with Social Security. Right now it's capped. Well, what if the cap is raised, right? That's going to have an impact. Yes, it'll probably save the Social Security system, but it is going to have an impact. So what things can we do now to plan for potential income tax increases. One of the things that we are doing is a lot of Roth IRA conversions. Okay. A lot of people who earn too much money are not allowed to have a tax-free Roth IRA. Okay. And it's really, once you hit a little over 200,000, you're not allowed to have that. So how are people with means doing it? They are doing something called a backdoor Roth. Okay, after the fact. And they are basically paying the tax on the money today, because maybe the income tax rate today is going to be lower than it's going to be in 2 weeks, right? So I'm paying the taxes today to get that money now into a Roth, which will then grow the benefit. Look, paying taxes, nobody likes to pay taxes. Whether I pay it today or I pay it, next year, it's probably going to be more if I pay it next year. But the point of the Roth conversion is it's now going to grow all these years tax-free, right? Whereas if it stayed in that traditional IRA, yes, I'm not paying tax today, but when I take the money out, will I be paying higher taxes? Pretty good chance the answer to that is yes. Okay, so what is happening is we are paying the tax today, but to have the growth, right, to go tax-free. Usually when we are talking with clients, Holly and Melissa, we are looking at what's the gap between the next tax break. Like if they're in the 22% bracket, okay, 2% to go to 24 maybe is not that severe, but to go to 32, we don't want them to go from 24 to 32%, right?
Right.
And the other thing that people don't always realize, though, that the 32% is only on the excess once you've just gone over. Like if you're allowed to have 226,000, you're still paying tax at the one rate. Once you go over the 226, if we're converting 20,000, it's just that 20,000 that might be taxed at the higher tax rate, not the whole 250,000.
Right.
Well, right. So, but we try not to go over. I mean, obviously, again, this is where we need to work with the accountant and make sure, maybe there are some losses that we want to take, from the market. Maybe there are other extreme medical expenses that year, particularly, as you've shared with me, individuals who have just an unusual year of medical expenses. Maybe their tax rate, the medical expense deduction, and again, I don't want to jump too fast, but that 7.5% excess over
Which is huge.
gross
Yeah.
income. Many people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, in their minds, they're like, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're paying $30,000, $50,000 a month for care, well, you know what? They could get there.
Yeah.
And so if this is that year and they are actually at the point where they're getting a credit for excess medical, then maybe this is a very good year to take advantage of it.
So Bruce, and I feel old because I remember when Senator Roth's IRA was passed in the 90s, when we had just had individual IRAs. But can you just give a reminder of how early a Roth IRA can be started and how late someone can contribute to a Roth, whereas they have more constraints under the individual traditional IRA? The Roth IRA is a little bit different. And it's evolved since, I think it was 97. It was signed into law, if I remember correctly. Again, showing my age. But could you just give a reminder about Roth IRAs in general? Because I think some people, even though it's been almost 30 years, they're still confused about the difference.
Yeah, I think it may be easier to explain the similarities. The amount that you can contribute is still the same, 7,000 or, over 50, you get that extra 1,000. There is an income limit, okay, that you can have, and it's lower for the Roth than it is for the traditional. I'm looking. I just don't want to give a wrong number. I don't have that exact number in front of me, but it grows tax-free. The money comes out tax-free. It does allow first-time home buyers to access the money before 59 and a half. So that is obviously a difference between that and a traditional IRA. If you take the money out of a Roth early, you're not necessarily paying a penalty, but you are losing the tax favored growth that you received. That is a concern that people need to be aware of, right? They think, well, I already paid tax on the money, I might as well just take it. But the growth that they receive tax deferred, they're going to lose that. I'm trying to think what else, like the money in a Roth, like I said, it's the growth that is what is really the big benefit, right? Because when we go to take it out, if we're in a much higher tax environment, wouldn't it be better to have tax-free income than taxable income? Most of our 401ks, most of our traditional IRAs are monies that we have not paid tax on all these years. And all we've seen is income tax rates go up, right? So I can only anticipate that the tax rates will be higher when we go to take the money out. So, I mean, is that answering your question, Holly?
It does. I know that, I geek out over this stuff, but when people hear terms like Roth IRA, I just want them to know that what that can be. And that's important. But once again, it goes back to the communication. And I think we can't stress enough that you have between, particularly financial advisor and accountant for any individual, not just those over 62. And then as part of an estate plan, like you're right now it's very difficult to get an estate planning appointment, probably for the next few months, depending on who wins. But as you know, in Pennsylvania right now, 1 in 4 of our population is seniors. But then the next 5 to 10 years, that is going to change to 1 in 3 of every Pennsylvanians is a senior. So these are big changes. And I can't speak to every state. And Melissa, I probably shouldn't pigeonhole it to PA, but Bruce and I are from PA, so we talk about it more. But I think that's important to note. So I didn't mean to take you off your track. I just get excited, Bruce, and want to help people like you do. So thank you.
I mean, I definitely can confirm what the limits are, but again, they're probably going to change in January anyway. And again, despite, regardless of who's put into office, usually we see changes in that in January. I do think, you brought up a very good point though, Holly. When you were just referencing that Melissa's in a different state than we are, a lot of these programs are federal programs, but they are administered by the states. And I'm always, like amazed when, oh, well, the Medicaid laws in Illinois you're allowed to have over $17,500 in Illinois, but in Pennsylvania, you're only allowed to have $2,000, right? And these are federal programs, right? These are federal programs, but they're administered by the state. We have a handful of states that have a state estate tax. You always hear people say, oh, Florida's the best place to die. There's no inheritance tax, right? But there are other fees, right? And probate fees and expenses. I have found there's no free lunch, right? There's no free lunch, right? You're going to find the place that's going to accommodate you the most. I mean, I have clients that have made Florida their primary residence, but they have a shore home in Margate and they have a home in Montgomery County. Well, they're going to have to pay the 4.5% inheritance taxes, in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Okay. They just on the lion's share of their estate, although often real estate is the lion's share, right? You're not going to pay, or their children won't pay, the 4.5% inheritance tax because there is no inheritance tax there. Okay. It's just very interesting. Every state is different. If we were talking in New York, it would be completely different, right? If I am not a linear descendant and I'm inheriting that money from my uncle, I'm going to pay 12% in tax. And if I just leave all my money to Holly, she's going to pay 15%. Okay. And that's just in a state inheritance tax. That has nothing to do with if there's a federal estate tax due. And, like I said, right now, the tax on anything over the 13.6 million per individual or 27.2 million as a couple is 40%. There is discussion of that being raised. In my lifetime, I had seen it up to 55%. Right? I've seen tax tables where it was over 55%. It's been around 40% since 2013. I haven't seen it going over 40%, but that is another thing that is up for discussion. Do we just raise the tax rate for estates over $27 million, right? So again, it's going to affect individuals differently, right? A lot of really exciting things, like, we all sort of suffered when we got rid of the mortgage deduction, right? You aren't allowed to deduct the interest on your mortgage. These are things that are being discussed about coming back under one administration, under the other administration. Again, child care credits, health care caps. Well, what impact does that have? Your pharma companies are not really excited about that, right? They're not excited about capping what they're allowed to charge for medications. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But from an overall estate planning perspective, I think that we have a very, very short window of opportunity, unless of course it gets extended. But I think, what we've always said is you must plan for today.
Right.
You must plan for the laws that are in place today, and then, modify them in the future. And so, what other things can we be doing today to take advantage? Like I said, doing these Roth conversions, setting up these trusts, taking advantage of the gifting opportunities that we're entitled to. I think also just being aware of deductions that we can take. I think a lot of people, like I said, they think, I'm never going to get to my medical expenses exceeding 7.5% of my adjusted gross income. But I'm actually talking to, Melissa, people our age who are supplementing the cost of their loved one in these facilities. And I'm talking about to significant amounts of money, okay? And I question, we're providing more than half of their support. Why aren't we claiming them on our income tax? Right?
Yeah.
The individual just has Social Security and a small school district pension, $2,100 a month, right? And we're spending over $10,000 a month for them to be in their facility. They're giving us the whole $2,100, but we're paying the rest. Why aren't I not taking them on my income tax as a dependent? So
Can you?
You can, yes, if you are responsible for more than 50% of someone's support. And again, I say to discuss it with an accountant to make sure that, by doing that, what other things might we be doing? Are we accepting liability? Again, we're always cautious of what we do because what's the ramifications of it, right? In a crisis, we're quick to sign to get our parents into a facility, but did we just sign financial liability?
Right.
Right. These are things that we need to be concerned about. Another thing that I've learned very recently, unfortunately, is if a parent dies, often the kids are responsible for a lot of their debts because if they sign financial responsibility. We are seeing a real uptick, especially post-COVID. Holly knows this intimately, from work that we've done together, of depression, suicide, right? Kids who are taking their own lives, and now their parents, okay, are left with their debts. And often the parents are on a fixed income. And even though, maybe, I have a mortgage on my townhouse, maybe my two buddies from college, we're flipping houses and we may have 3 or 4 projects going. Well, now my mother on a fixed income with Social Security, she's going to want my share, right? She's going to want to be paid out. Well, but meanwhile, these properties aren't finished, right? And the only way she'll ever get paid out is if she continues to pay the 1/3, right? What plans have been made for that?
Yeah.
None of us are ever really wired to think that our children could predecease us.
Right. And the problem is, and I think, Melissa, I brought this up on my tutorial or whatever I did in the beginning of Club 62 Plus, but Bruce and I live in a state where there's something called filial law. And once again, this is not legal advice. We are not lawyers. But if you are in a place that is a commonwealth, like Bruce and I in Pennsylvania, there's also the Commonwealth of Virginia. I believe
Right.
Massachusetts is a commonwealth. If you live in a commonwealth, we still have colonial laws on the
Yep.
books.
Yeah.
And one of the colonial laws is something called filial law, FILIAL law. And what Bruce is referencing is that, and this is also a good time with your planning, if you are responsible for someone else or there's been a death in the family or something, you could be responsible for their debts. If you are a taxpayer in the state of Pennsylvania or a commonwealth, you have to be in the same commonwealth. But heaven forbid, Bruce is my son and Bruce has acquired all this debt. He's not married. And Bruce predeceases me.
Yep.
I may be responsible as his mother for that
My
debt.
debt. Yep.
And it never goes away. It's like child support and student loans. Those are two other things that never go away once you owe them. And so I think it's just, it all goes back to communication, which I don't mean to beat a dead horse to death, but be aware of filial law for those that are in commonwealths like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Virginia. So Melissa, we got into the weeds. I might have made Bruce get into the weeds too much, but do you think for those that will be listening to this at another time, for someone that does not do this every day, like Bruce and I do you think it's been clear enough that Bruce should move on, or should we go a little bit further? What do you think now that you've listened to this?
Well, what I'm taking away from this up till now is that it varies state to state.
Yes.
The laws and how things are handled. And now I just learned for the first time about the Commonwealth law in those states is different, and they refer to colonial laws that I had no idea about. So I think it's very, very good advice that people have to go to the proper planners, their
Yes.
accountant, their estate planner, and make sure to be aware of their laws in order to protect themselves properly and to plan properly for your loved ones, and that you don't get hit with some surprise that could be really devastating with a loved one's debts that you might not have had any idea you could be responsible for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when a parent co-signs a college loan, like the federal loans that our kids receive typically are forgiven if they pass. But if we've signed it, we're on it, and how many parents are helping children buy their first homes and
Yes.
co-signing mortgages? Well, guess what? You're responsible. And one of the things, that you really look at is, well, maybe I took a home equity loan to help my kids buy a house and now they can't pay their mortgage, right?
Yes.
Like, these are all real things that, you got to be very, very careful about. And look, not that we all want to help our children, but what if, you want to make sure that they can afford to pay that mortgage. And what happens if now I need to, again, I never had a mortgage on my house, right? My house has been paid off. Now I took $100,000 line of credit, and now my wife and I need to go into a facility. Well, are my kids in a position to hand me back that 100,000? No. Even if they've been paying the mortgage, even if they've been paying the interest on that home equity line of credit, which by the way has doubled over the last few years, right? They were 2-3%, they're up to 8% now, right? So, these are things that, maybe people are doing and maybe they're not the best ideas, right?
So that's come through loud and clear, is that you really have to have a good plan based on the laws within your state and to understand your potential risks. And
Yep.
yeah. Wow.
And as a beneficiary, like let's say my parents moved to Florida and they're going to die in Florida because of the tax laws. It's not based on, well, I live in Pennsylvania, right? Let's reverse it. Let's say I live in Florida or Delaware where there is no tax. My parents are in Pennsylvania. They die in Pennsylvania. I have to pay the 4.5 or the 12% tax. That doesn't go away, right? It goes by where the individual died who's leaving the assets. It doesn't go, oh, well, Holly gets away with it free and clear because she lives in Delaware. You know, she's my sister. She lives in Delaware, but I have to pay it because I live in Pennsylvania. No, it's where the individual passes that
Yes.
determines what the taxes will be.
I agree with that. And I think a lot of people, not to be morbid, but when I was in banking, we had a very well-known estate planning case where it was two brothers that went to a family wedding in New York, and they were driving under the influence. And the one brother died in the accident on the throughway. They were not New York state residents, but because the one brother died in New York, there were substantial impacts to the estate, because you never know when you're taken. And then you look at someone like George Steinbrenner, right? The owner of the Yankees. Remember when he died in that gap year when there was no federal estate tax and he happened to die in Florida?
Yeah.
It was that one crazy year, I think, but I don't know if it's the Bush years or whatever. And his family wound up saving a ton of money. He had not intended to die in Florida. I think he was at spring training for the Yankees and died in Florida. And
But then there's the Robbie family that owned the
yes,
Miami Dolphins, and they had to sell the team to pay the
yes,
estate taxes. You can Google that. That is a true story.
it's a
You
crazy
know,
story. Yeah,
it is a crazy story, but when people's estates are illiquid,
yes,
there are a lot of the individuals that we meet, who have tons and tons of real estate, right? I always say, well, which brick are you selling to pay the tax? What brick do we sell?
yeah,
Oh, I want that shore house to stay in my family. I want that main property to stay in my family. Taxes are due within 9 months of death. And where are they getting the liquidity to pay the taxes? And often properties are sold at really severely depressed values just so that the kids can pay the taxes. It's really a shame when the thought and the planning has not been done.
Mhm.
It really is kind of tragic. Um, Holly, I do have a couple of other things that I
Oh
just
yeah,
want
no,
to,
please. I can go
I
off on
want to,
tangents.
I
So
want
please
to
make sure.
I want to sort of highlight again, we have until basically April 15th, if you are eligible to participate in an IRA, to take advantage of it, right? It needs to be in effect before the end of the year, but you don't have to fund it until April 15th. I think a lot of people now, a lot of companies have their open enrollment period for next year. If you haven't elected, certain benefits and it is open enrollment and there's no underwriting there, they don't look at pre-existing conditions. This past year, what we have seen with individuals suffering short and long-term disabilities, you're not exempt from it. And one of my friends, 50 years old, he had no group insurance. The irony is here, Holly, he's a veterans benefits counselor that helps veterans get their benefits. He did not elect the $2.30 a month
Oh,
disability benefit. Remember, Social Security doesn't kick in until 6 months of
yes.
disability. And usually it's a 6-month waiting period just to get approved. Okay. They have no income coming in. The wife took off for family leave from work. She's only getting paid half of her salary. This is one of the most tragic things I've
Mm.
ever seen, right? One of the most tragic things I've ever seen. Again, we could do a separate lecture on how do you help families like that. We did have a family, the husband developed ALS. They had not purchased any type of long-term health care coverage, but we did find out that their company did accelerate a life insurance benefit because obviously with ALS, you are going to die, right? There's no recovery from that. And we were able to access 25% of $1 million. I've seen it go up to 90% where you can reverse engineer some of these policies. But look, $250,000 when we were at the end of this gentleman's life did allow them to get a lot of home accommodations and care so that he could live out his life with dignity. And then the balance of the death benefit was paid out. But again, these are things that you need to be aware of. If you do have long-term care, there are tax credits for those premiums. People don't necessarily realize that. You can participate in flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts. look at the benefits that are being offered to you now. And if you haven't taken advantage of them in the past, you may want to just have a discussion with an advisor to see if it makes sense. Should I do this? Should I? Often when you're filling out these papers, you're given the option to do it before tax or after tax. Now I'm going to contradict myself. Obviously, for healthcare costs, right? You want to be able to get that so that you're not paying tax on the money, right? But for disability insurance, if you pay for it after tax, the premium, the benefit is tax-free. If I pay for it before tax, when I receive the benefit per month, I'm paying tax on it. It's much better to receive tax-free benefits. Okay? Certainly for your health insurance, yes, if you get the opportunity to pay for that before tax, your retirement contributions before tax often is a huge tax break for individuals. But be mindful of, if you do have an option to have that Roth option in your 401k, and some of your contribution can grow tax-free and can come out, and come out tax-free as opposed to taxable. Again, I think there's a place for that. We all feel the taxes are going to be higher 10 years from now, 5 years from now when we retire. So the more money that we can have income tax free at that time, I think the better, everybody's going to feel. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that was really jumping out that I thought was important to talk about today. I mean, obviously, after the election, we'll see what actually does get implemented, and what we might want to take advantage of. I think I hit all the key points. I don't know if either of you have any questions at this point. Contributions to 529 plans and ABLE accounts, they also grow tax-free and can be withdrawn for qualified education expenses. ABLE accounts are for individuals with special needs who are accumulating money over the $2,000 limit that they're allowed. You can put in up to $18,000 a year. If the individual is working, they can put an extra $14,500 into the ABLE account, but the ABLE account cannot exceed $100,000. And again, this is a case where every state dictates whether or not they are payback. In Pennsylvania, at this point, it is not a payback to the state. But in other states, it is a payback. But it is a place for individuals who maybe work part-time and are collecting Social Security and Medicaid, that they can accumulate more than that $2,000 limit. If I drive, I need money to buy new tires. I'm going to need money if my car breaks down, right? So I can access money from my ABLE account to pay for those things. So that was something that the government put into place in 2017. And it sort of slipped in under the radar. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion about it. You couldn't even fund one for a couple of years. You couldn't find, in 2014, the law was passed. In 2017, we saw the first ABLE accounts with Vanguard and with some of the fund companies be available from the states to be able to fund. At the time, the law said, and again, this could be Pennsylvania specific, the disability had to occur before the age of 26. Well, how about those of us who are now being diagnosed with sports injuries from college? Maybe I have frontal lobe dementia and I'm now 56. Well, Pennsylvania is now changing their law in 2026 that it's up to age 46. So there's going to now be an extra 20 years that this disability could have occurred, that we would be able to take advantage of that. So like I said, a lot of these laws are already in place and a lot of these laws are coming into place. But I think it makes a lot of sense to speak to an advisor, speak to your accountant, speak to your attorney to make sure that your affairs are in order, particularly with the proposed changes that are on the horizon. I think that for years now, because the estate tax limit of 27 million was just so out of reach for so much of our population, it was sort of, okay, well, I don't need to worry about it. But you know what? 6-7 million, and again, we still may say that's a lot of money, but if I have, a home, home now is worth $1 million. A Shore home could be worth the Shore home that we inherited from Aunt Mary that she bought for $23,000 could be worth 2.3 million today, right? That little tiny Shore home, because it's located between two casinos, and the casinos are willing to pay anything to get it from me, right? Okay, so more and more of us are at that estate tax threshold. So I think it really behooves us to talk to a lawyer to see about setting up a trust, maybe putting properties in the trust to avoid or to minimize taxes going forward, if the plan is to keep those assets with the family. I think this is just an opportunity for all of us to sort of reset, relook at how we've been doing things. And should Holly fund more into a Roth? Does she need the greater tax deduction because tax rates are so high right now? And maybe she's going to put more money into her traditional accounts, right? Where should we be? Again, a lot of this is going to unfold next week,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is already out there on the table.
I
And
agree with you. And first of all, if there is any Aunt Mary listening to this, between Bruce and I, we have a ton of charities that would benefit greatly from that $2 million Shore home down the shore.
yeah,
We would greatly take that off of your hands. But I think, Bruce, thank you for this. And I know that this is being recorded, but for those of you that see the recording earlier, Bruce has another very timely Zoom coming up on Wednesday, November 13th, from 12 to 1 with, by then, hopefully we know, Bruce, right, who won. And what's telling is, and this is not political in any way, this is just factual, but the presidency just doesn't matter, Bruce. The Congress and the Senate also matter, because a president
very
can
much
say
so.
X,
Very
Y,
much so.
Z, but the Congress spends the money and the Senate ultimately approves things. And so you have to have those in line. And of course, everyone has their own agenda and what they ran on, and they can be dramatically different when it comes to tax plans. So I thank you, Bruce, as always. I think we could go on for another hour, don't you, Melissa, easily? And I think it's important when you watch this video, whether you watch this video now or even in early 2025, if there is something you would like Bruce to speak on, and I can have Bruce speak on about just about anything, because as you can see, he knows his stuff. Please let Melissa know, because we want to provide programming that you find beneficial and helpful. I talk to Bruce literally a couple times a week, and I still learn every time. And I'm not just saying that. It's important because when you've been doing this for a long time, you remember things and you've seen everything. And when you work with people that have seen everything, there's a difference that you can see. And just one last thing, if you are looking for a financial advisor, you want to check out something called Broker Check. I know Bruce has it on his website, but I know I've mentioned this before, but you can even just Google or use your preferred search engine of Broker Check. And first you want to see, does that financial advisor have any disciplinary issues? Are there any letters in his or her file? Next, you can see how long they've been practicing and who they've been with. So if you check out Bruce Sham, I can already ruin the surprise. There are no disciplinary issues. He's like Mr. Clean. He's squeaky clean, and he hasn't worked for many companies. He's very loyal. But you
I
can
take it very seriously, Holly.
yes.
I mean, I take that very seriously. 47 years to not have a ding is
right. Reputation's everything, and you can see all of Bruce's licenses and where he's permitted to practice. Because before you talk to an advisor, like Bruce is mentioning different states, Bruce has licenses to practice in those states. So I think that's key. But the next thing is when you see how long they've been practicing, and this is not a knock on someone 1 or 2 years, because we've all been new in a job, but can someone without the benefit of experience truly be able to advise you? And I think, Bruce, you would say that even for some of your colleagues, if they've been in the industry 1 or 2 years, you'd want someone, at least to partner with them, that's more seasoned, we'll call it, that has that life advice. And so, Melissa, Bruce, thank you once again for your time. I appreciate it. And I know what it's like to take an hour out of your day, trust me. But Melissa, is there any other questions you have or anything you'd want to say to the audience before we wrap this up?
Well, I just want to thank you, Bruce. Very informative. Holly, your questions brought out more information. And yes, Bruce's follow-up to this is going to be post-election
Yep.
tips. So, uh, I think we did understand that you need to get professionals to really give you good advice, seasoned preferably. And you can find Bruce's information if you want to know more on the Club 62 website under the contributors, as well as Holly. They both do a lot in this area of helping people and families with a lot of challenges. So thank you guys for all of the gifts you've just shared.
Well,
Oh,
thank
you're
you.
welcome. Thank
And
you,
if you'd
Melissa.
like
It's
to
been a
email
pleasure.
Bruce, you can email him at bsham, SHAM, at financial guide. That's one word, FINANCIAL guide, GUIDE.com. And if you are Aunt Mary with a shore home, please put Aunt Mary in the subject line and we will make sure.
Yeah, you'll
And
get the
Bruce can
first
even
call.
forward it to me. Bruce and
Yep.
I will be on that like me on a shoe sale. So
That'll
we
be the first
appreciate
call.
it. All right, thank you and have a wonderful day. And we will be back in 2 weeks to talk to you again. Take care.
All right.
Thank you,
everybody.
both of you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you,
Thank
Holly.
you.